Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for those of you that are here. Wonderful to see you. It looks like you can see a random cat tail in the corner. He might show his face, he might not. So today we're talking in celebration of the Buddha's birthday. We are talking about killing the Buddha. As I wrote, the word Buddha just means awake. When you're awake to this moment, you're Buddha, right? That's it. So to do that, I'm using a reading from Zen Master Dogen, because all of this work, I don't like the word work. I gotta find another word. All of this practice, all of this that I do, all of this that all of these people for 2,500, 3,000 years have done, is all aimed at living awake to this precious moment, to this impermanent moment, because everything is impermanent. Everything is changing and moving. Yeah. So I'm going to use my favorite Zen teacher, Eihei Dogen. He was born in the year 1200, right? He is credited mostly with really bringing the teaching, even though the teaching of Buddhism had come from China to Japan long before his existence. He went to China and really studied and really saw through his ideas, his identity, his concepts of reality to such an extent that he was considered one of the founding fathers of Zen in Japan, even though his existence was much later in time. When Buddhism first came to Japan, it meant Shintoism and a lot of the pagan religious beliefs. And as I alluded to in the email this morning, there's many traditions that have taken the ideas of Buddhism and turned them into a religion. Buddhism is not a religion. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, he was a man. He was a dude. He was a guy. He was not a god. And he vehemently admonished anyone who followed him to not believe a word he said, to go find out for themselves. And if you work privately with me, and I'm sure in some of these videos I've alluded to it, I know I have, don't believe me. Don't believe anyone. Don't believe yourself. Yet trust yourself, right? When I say don't believe yourself, that's actually what we're going to be talking about today. It's the same as kill the Buddha. In Buddhism, when it says if you meet the Buddha, kill the Buddha, what it's saying is if you think you know it, if I think I've met enlightenment, like to be awake, to be alive, if I think I know something or understand it, if I think I know you, if I think I know myself, kill that. Because those thoughts are limited. You are limiting your existence by your own thinking. We know from science we perceive less than 0.00003% of reality, right? We can perceive so little of what actually is. We physically don't have the sense organs to do it. We do not know. When you kill the Buddha, you're killing your idea of something else. You're killing the idea of oh, this is it. This is not it, because it is moving. Nothing stops long enough to be anything, right? It's moving. It's impermanent. And that impermanence is life, which brings us first full circle that the whole point of everything I do is for us to live this precious, fleeting, ephemeral existence. And the more we wake up to our not knowing, and the more we wake up to the ephemeral reality of our existence, counterintuitively, we actually are more connected and live more. So to that end, here's the quote, and this is also written. Typical of my books, they have a lot of notes. I'm pulling from of this version the first 2 pages of guidelines for studying the way of living, right? Guidelines for living, for studying, for practicing, being alive, right? But I'm only pulling about 5 or 6 lines from all of this because Dogen, he is brilliant, but he's deep and complicated. So, I've studied this a few times, and I'm actually restudying it now. Every morning I always have something that I'm reading and journaling on and studying. And as I'm going through this again, it's just opening up more and more, as these things do. Yeah. So the first line of Dogen's guidelines for studying the way is, you should arouse the thought of enlightenment. What is enlightenment? If I turn on the lights, I've enlightened a room, right? The sun rises, the room becomes enlightened, right? The world becomes enlightened. Enlightened just means to wake up. What does the Buddha mean? The word Buddha literally means awake. When you are awake to this moment, and that means not thinking, because if you're thinking, you're not totally in this moment. Your ideas of the moment are actually a barrier between you and reality. So if you're quiet and awake, we're not talking about drifting off into la la land or, not aware. This is why we practice, why we have, hopefully everyone's practicing every day, but we have our Thursday practice class to actually practice living this. When I'm still, quiet, silent, slow, relaxed, I'm aware, I'm alive. It's a physical practice. Buddhism at its heart is a physical practice that we physically practice. We practice being alive. So Dogen's very first line is, you should arouse the thought, the thinking of enlightenment, right? Seems counterintuitive, right? In another part of the book, he says, you should think not thinking. And he says, you should think not thinking. What is that? He says, how do you think not thinking? By not thinking. So you can direct your mind. An old trick that you'll hear lots of wisdom and other figures do is, just right now, tell your mind to say hello to itself 5 times. Think hello 5 times. Were you able to direct your mind to think hello 5 times? You can use your mind to direct your mind. So when he says think not thinking, you just kind of tell your mind, don't think. Thoughts will arise. You become aware of them, you come back to not thinking. It's a continual returning. So when he says you should arouse the thought of enlightenment, he means you should arouse the thought of being awake, of alive. You should arouse the thought of not thinking. Right? He then uses he calls him Ancestor Nagarjuna. So, probably, God, when was Nagarjuna? A good, possibly 1,000 years prior to Dogen. Nagarjuna was one of the patriarchs of Buddhism. Ancestor Nagarjuna said, and again, this is all written in the description below or in the email if you have it, the mind that fully sees into the uncertain world of birth and death is called the thought of enlightenment. So how do you wake up to reality? You see into uncertainty. You see specifically into the uncertain world of birth and death. Birth and death, life and death, identity, meaning, purpose. These are the questions I really like to center all of my work around. Because when you look into them, you see that they don't exist. And at the same time, it's nothing but their existence, right? So I was actually just talking with my prior client about this. Like, when does birth begin and when does death begin and when does life end? When does birth begin and when does life end? And there's a line in another text. Do I have it here? I moved all my Zen books upstairs, so I don't know if I have a copy of this here. No, I don't. There's a line in the second book of the Tao where it says, birth vanishes into death and death vanishes into birth. That there's actually no demarcation line between them. And we've talked about this. If you go through the lives from prior weeks, we've talked about this a few times. So what these masters are encouraging us to do is to think about being awake to this moment. And to do that is to look into uncertainty. They're encouraging uncertainty, which is so counterintuitive to specifically the Western mindset, but they were speaking to the Eastern mindset. I don't know at what point in humanity, but we look to certainty. We look to know. But knowing and certainty, if you really think about them, are the direct path to suffering. Because when you're certain or you are detached from reality. Because as we just mentioned, you cannot know reality, right? But I can know that he's cute. You're so handsome. Oh, what a handsome boy. Look at the sweet boy. Oh, look at that butt. Look at that tail. You can know that that's so cute. He's weird. He's so weird. I love it. I don't know if you can see how weird he's being right now. Just show him weird. Oh, but now you're going to be cute and handsome too. Should be weird. You be weird. Cats are a great teacher of the uncertainty principle of reality. They are ungovernable. You cannot control them. You cannot predict them. Right? They are incredible teachers. The mind that fully sees, he's like, enough of that, lady. No more. Oh, he's so cute. And we could just do this whole class on how cute you are and how sweet you are. Oh, it's going to give us a little belly view. How wonderful is this? Yeah? So wonderful. The mind that fully sees into the uncertain world of birth and death, fully sees into uncertainty. The mind that can fully know that it doesn't know. This is called the thought of enlightenment. When you know that you don't know, you can wake up to reality. That's all that they're saying. Can you really look at your thoughts so closely that you see through them? I'm not going to get rid of the thought that this is a pencil. Yet I'm going to be able to see through that it's much more than a pencil, more than I could ever perceive of. Right? We don't get rid of our thinking, but we have the ability to use it and go beyond it. There's a great teaching where Master Nansen is trying to teach the monks, and there's this whole thing. Actually, it's a scene with a cat. And he admonishes the monks who are fighting over the cat. They're actually fighting, does the cat have Buddha nature or not, right? Is the cat awake? And they're fighting over it. So Nansen comes and picks up the cat, and he holds the cat up, and it's a horrible story. He holds the cat up, and he says, if one of you monks can say one word of Zen, one word of reality, I won't have to kill this cat. This is kill the Buddha, right? Kill it. Kill this thing that you think is or isn't it. Kill the idea, right? And the monks are just stunned in silence. And So he kills the cat, much to his own heartbreak, right? But it's like, kill this thing that you're attached to. Kill these notions, kill these minds. And later on, the head monk, Master Joshu, comes back, and Nansen is recounting the story to Joshu. And Joshu hears the story, and he takes his sandal off his foot, puts it on his head, and walks away. And Nansen goes, if you had only been here, I could have saved the cat. Now, this is a famous teaching story. It's a fable. We actually don't know if the story is actually happened or not. There's conjecture that it absolutely did happen. Then there's other conjecture that it was just a story, and that no cat was harmed. But the utility here is, well, there's a lot of utility in that story, but the one that I'm going to point to is that Joshu is not attached to the idea that his sandal was a shoe. He was able to put it on his head as if it were a hat and walk away without a shoe. Use everything. Be unattached to the names, the labels, the ideas, and live here and now. So, the mind that sees fully into the uncertain world of birth and death is called the thought of enlightenment. When you see fully into the uncertainty of this world that is nothing but birth and death and death and birth, and that there is no death and birth, that there is no cat or Kirsten, right? That these are constructs of the mind that are ephemeral, consistently changing. Well, then you can be intimate with reality. You can be alive to reality. Be alive now, not stuck in your mind's idea of now, but alive to now. Further down in the paragraph, Dogen says, fearing the swift passage of sunlight. And if you watch the days can go by so quickly, right? Fearing the swift passage of sunlight, practice the way as though saving your head from fire. Practice now. Now is gone. You can, as you practice this way of living now, you see that now is constantly gone. It's always new. That now is dead, now born. When did now become now? Is there a birth and a death demarcation? Check it out. Fearing the swift passage of sunlight, time is moving. Practice the way as if saving your head from fire. Be that awake, that urgent in your aliveness, that you don't let a moment of sunlight pass without your awareness to it, that you're not lost in your head and living your life half asleep, that you're living your life awake. Practice living your life awake. This goes back to the Thursday class. It's so hard in our Western world to live this life awake and not in our heads when we live in a literal knowledge-based economy. Your worth and value are so deeply tied to what you know, think, say, and do. They're tied to your certainty, to your abilities to decipher and discern and to know. And these wisdom teachers about how to actually live are saying you must go be uncertain, be not knowing, live not knowing. So it does require practice, because 99.9% of our time when we're not practicing, and if you're not practicing none of your time, are you actually practicing being alive to here and now? It is a practice, and then the more you practice, the more alive you become. Anyone who's worked with me, or anyone that's worked with any of this, there's a reason why meditation and mindfulness are a huge thing. It's because they work. And the more they study it, the more evidence that shows. You lower your blood pressure, you have better executive functioning, you're more productive, you're calmer, you're happier, right? Like there's a whole 10% happier thing with Dan Harris, right? Like the power of meditation is now scientifically proven. These guys didn't have science. right? 2,500, 3,000 years ago. And they weren't proselytizing or evangelizing. The practice of just being in their body made them so embodied that people were attracted to them. They're like, ooh, I see your embodiment. I want that. You practice this and everything does come to you. I don't know how or why, but it does. So they're saying, fearing the swift passage of sunlight. Time is dynamic and moving. Our life is ephemeral. Practice the way. Practice living awake, not knowing. Practice not knowing. Practice uncertainty, as though saving your head from fire. Because most of the time our heads are on fire, right? Reflecting on this ephemeral life. Realize, he said, reflect upon it. Actually do think about it. We're not getting rid of thought. We are using thought. Like he says, arouse the thought of enlightenment is the very first line in Dogen's guidelines for living. Think about being awake. Remember to be awake. Just like I said, think about saying hello. You do it. Think about it. You do it. Reflect on how ephemeral this life is. Realize how time passes. Realize it. Be awake to it. Realize how everything is changing. Everything is in a constant state of equal living and dying. The moment that I first came on here and started talking, that moment is dead and gone. And it is nothing but now, and now, and now. Reflecting on this ephemeral life, make endeavor in the manner of Buddha raising his foot. I love this line because in many Eastern cultures, the foot is the lowest of the low. It is gross, it is dirty, right? So the choice of words here is quite brilliant. Reflecting on this ephemeral life, realizing how tenuous and changing and ungraspable and uncertain our existence is. Make endeavor, practice in the manner of Buddha. Buddha, someone who's awake, raising his foot, just lifting his foot, lifting the lowest and most mundane of moments. Make endeavor of the manner of the Buddha washing this dish. You know, there's koans, the riddles that Zen practitioners use to help them awaken. And so many of the answers to these things where, like, it'll be a story of a monk studying under a master and him asking, what is the point of life? What is Zen? Like, why do things happen the way they do? What is life? What is death? And the master will answer, 3 pounds of flax, right? The oak tree in the front garden. And my favorite one is, well, because I'm on YouTube, I can't use the actual word, but the literal translation is the curse word for poop. And, you know, a monk asks a master, what is the meaning of life? And he goes, a poop stick. We think that the references there is, I guess, they had a stick that they wiped their butt with. You know, the dried poop on a stick. That is the meaning of life. The Buddha raising his foot. Be so awake and aware of every ephemeral, uncertain, changing moment, and you are alive. And it just takes practice. The more you practice it, the more it becomes. So cute. Yes. He's like, why are you touching me? I was resting in the sunlight. Okay. We're already at time. We're over time. So I know some people have to go, and I try to keep these short so that they're accessible, but we're just about to get into the really good stuff. So he keeps on talking, arousing the thought of enlightenment, right? And then he says, without throwing away name and gain, it cannot be called arousing the thought of enlightenment. Without throwing away name and gain, it can't be called the thought of enlightenment. So unless you throw away your names and you throw away gain, you have not aroused the thought of enlightenment. What does this mean? What is he saying? Without throwing away name and gain, it cannot be called arousing the thought of enlightenment. It's like a jumble of words almost, right? No. So, what are name and gain? Name, Kirsten. Cat. His name's not Cat, but cute kitty. Oh, so soft. Without throwing away Cat, right? Without throwing away Kirsten, you are attached to an idea of Cat and you're attached to an idea of Kirsten. Now, we have a few people on this thing right now live with us. Thank you guys for being here. Super grateful. You each have a very different idea of who I am. No two are the same. And none of those ideas are the same as the idea that I have of me. None of them are right. None of them are wrong, but none of them are right. But until each of us throw away the idea of Kirsten, none of us can see Kirsten. This goes back to, if you see the Buddha, kill the Buddha. Kill your idea of the Buddha, because that's not Buddha. That's not it. Throw away your idea of Kirsten, because any idea you have of me is not it. Throw away your idea of self. Whoever you are, whoever you think you are, that is not who you are. And what's so cool about this is when you begin to do this, you and everyone get bigger. Right? Because you're not limited by the limited thought-based words. The client before that I had just before this had such a great way of talking about language. Totally stealing it. But giving credit. A person knows who he is if he ever watches this. Words are a weak proxy for reality. A weak proxy for reality. All of our language and thoughts are a weak proxy for reality. They're a proxy, but they're a weak one. Right? Your idea of Kirsten is a weak proxy for Kirsten. Your idea of yourself is a weak proxy for yourself. Your idea of the cat is a weak proxy for cat. As long as you have an idea of a name, tissues, right? Weak proxy, right? Any idea I have of this gets in the way of me seeing the more. If I think I know, I think I'm certain. What did he just say? Fully sees into uncertainty is the thought of enlightenment. If I know anything, I am mountains and rivers away from being awake to my life. Without throwing away name, it cannot be called arousing the thought of enlightenment. He says, without throwing away name and gain, it cannot be called the thought of enlightenment. So we talked about name, and now that should make sense. Also, just a quick note, I had written about this in my blog. I got to update that. I've written about it a few times. I talk about it often. One of my favorite koans is not knowing is most intimate. If you want to be intimate with me, you want to be intimate with the cat, you want to be intimate with the tissues, you want to be intimate with a friend, a parent, a child, a partner, you must not know them. Because any thought you have of them is putting them in a box of your mind's creation. That is not who they are. Allow them to be bigger. Allow yourself to be bigger. Throw away name, and you actually become more intimate. This translates directly to gain. Throw away gain. You'll often hear it said in wisdom teaching, specifically in Zen, Buddhism, Taoism, no gain, no loss. How could there be no gain and no loss when I get a new client and they pay me money, I've clearly gained some money. And if a client decides that they're not going to renew, I've clearly lost a client. How could there be no gain or loss? Because I can see, right? If any of you guys knew me in the beginning, there was another cat that I had who was the love of my life. And he passed away. He's no longer here. How can you say that there's no loss of the cat? What are these wisdom teachers what game are they trying to say that there's no gain and loss? There's clearly gain and loss. This is a much bigger discussion. So cute when they stretch. Look at that handsome dude, right? Like, how cute is that? There's gain in the cuteness. He stretches and I gain some cuteness in my life. Man, right? How could there be no gain? What is it? What are they talking about? Well, there's no gain in the same way that there's no Kirsten. There's no gain in the same way that there's no cat. There's a cat, there's a Kirsten, but they are not what I think they are. And if you really get into this Zen work, the reason why you arouse the thought of enlightenment, you arouse the ideas of no birth, no death, you arouse the idea of uncertainty, you move, you want to move, as opposed to modern life where we want to move more and more into certainty and knowing. You want to move more and more into uncertainty and not knowing. Because the more you do, the bigger things are. They always have been, but the limits you placed on them, they get bigger. Well, if it works for name, it also works with gain and loss. Because ultimately, we are all one thing. If you go to the International Space Station and look at Earth, you see one thing. Looks like a ball, a marble, or a beach ball or something, right? One round thing. Everything on this earth comes and returns to the earth. It just is the earth. We are the earth. Even though the birds fly around the earth, they are the earth. There's no separation. It's just your distance makes things look separate or not. You get a microscope and go into my body, this one body that looks whole, you'll see lots of little separate cells. And they're one. There's no separation. When you can throw away gain and loss is when you begin to feel into the oneness of this existence. Right? How could that be when clearly you guys are over there and I'm over here? Right? There's a cat. I do not know what he's thinking or feeling right now. Right? That cat has no idea what I'm thinking or feeling. We can sense each other. Right? Just like I don't know where your left foot is, you don't know where my right foot is. Right? How could we be one thing if we can't sense each other? It's the same way my toes can't sense my eyebrows. And yet, on a deep level, they are connected and they do sense each other. This is why we have to go beyond the limits of our thinking mind. We have to kill the mind, kill the Buddha. Kill this, what we think we want or know, in order to be more deeply connected to life, to reality, to be more intimate. The reason we throw away gain is that we're not separate. There's nothing to gain because you are the whole thing. Look at the earth. You are the earth. You're not a part of earth. You are the earth. Right? And what's really cool is that modern science has proven this. I'll often take out the Lynn Margulis microbiology textbook where she quotes, something along the lines of, I'm going to butcher the quote, microbiologist, right? Carl Sagan's wife, saying, even though it seems as if mountain and rivers and people have come and gone in 100 million years, not one thing has passed away. Because from the point of view of science, this is one whole thing. This is not some new age airy-fairy la bull. From the point of view of science, my client gifts, which I still haven't gotten them all out yet, they recently just started going out. My client gifts this year is one of my favorite books. It's called Einstein and Buddha, right? Where it's Einstein and Buddha, the parallel sayings. And it's so cool because this book will take like Schrodinger and then Cheng Tzu and show how almost word for word they say the same thing. How these Eastern wisdom teachers who got to the wisdom just by sitting, by going beyond the limits of their mind, they were able to intuit what modern science has now proven. This is not esoteric New Age la-la stuff. This is science that all of us have access to if we can get quiet, if we can get uncertain. The uncertainty is necessary for the quiet, because if we think that we know, we're going to keep going on our thoughts. We're going to lean on our thoughts. We're going to stay in our thoughts because we think that they're real and right and true. When you can see that they're never right and true, that they might have an aspect of reality to them, but they're not the whole, that they're limited and they're limiting, then we can begin to go beyond into the more that we are, that everyone is, right? So when you throw away gain, when you realize that you are the whole and the one, that there's nothing to gain and nothing to lose, no life to gain, no life to lose, is when you can begin to actually feel into, oh my God, there is no birth or death. This is a concept that you might mentally see, especially if we pull some science into it. But that's like trying to describe a mango to someone who's never eaten fruit or never even had any form of sweet. They've only had steak. You know, they've been a carnivore their whole existence. You explain fruit to them. I explain, say, an apple to that person. They eat a tangerine. They're like, this is totally an apple. You know, like, it's absolutely not an apple. But you said it's both tangy and crisp and juicy and sweet. This is tangy and crisp and juicy and sweet. The tangerine is different. It's such a different thing. It's not even close. You can't understand it till you feel it. And that's what happens when you practice. That's why the Thursday Zoom practice class is so important. You can get the link in the description below if you don't already have it, because all this talking is essentially nonsense. I'm pointing you towards it, but when you practice it, these guys didn't read it from others. They practiced it and figured it out on their own. You sit, you get quiet. This is clear. You throw away gain. You realize you have everything. But what about, I need a house and I need a car and I need an income? Yeah. And here's, I put these theories to work in building this business. I laid it on the line. I do no work. Right? The more I follow my body, my not knowing, my body, moment by moment, the more this job does itself. It comes through me. It is me. It is you. And I've found the more I relax and don't try to gain money or clients or business, the more the business comes to me. I mean, I have not sought out any clients since 2000 and maybe 18. Definitely 2017 is when when I really got into the groove of this. I started the business in 2015 and I had the theory of following this. It took me 2 years to really get in the groove. And then the more I released, and the more I also just let things work out the way they did. I had my idea of the business and the reality of the idea was this way, the reality was that way. And the more I followed my idea, but let myself be guided, this business has just done itself. I'm now totally sold out, right? And I love it. And I love my clients. They amaze me, right? And it's just, they just come. And I knew that that was something I had to do in order to do this work, because if I wasn't living it, how could you? You can't teach something you're not living. And I'm constantly learning to live it. I never get it right. But the more I would throw away gaining income, gaining clients, gaining things, didn't mean that I just sat on the couch and ate chocolate and binge watch TV. No, it was, I had to practice and I had to listen to my body and I had to follow my body. Do I send an email? Do I not? Do I do this? Do I do that? What is right? What is wrong? I don't know. I get curious. I get uncertain and I listen. And then the next thing does itself. And next thing you know, someone's introducing me to someone and then the right clients just come effortlessly again and again. And I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I know that should all of a sudden the business decide that it's going to disintegrate, that the next right thing will become clear. There might be a lull period in between. I don't know. But the more I throw away ideas of gain in my work, in my home, in my life, in my family, in my friends, the more it's just there, right? And I can try to explain this to you, but it's like explaining a mango to someone who's never had fruit until you begin to test this and feel it. And these are my happiest moments with my clients or with any of you. When you have those moments of, oh, I took a breath and, oh, it became clear. It happens almost every session now where we'll take a breath, we'll get quiet, and within a few moments, ooh, a clarity, an awareness, a knowing comes up in the silence. So until you throw away name and gain, it cannot be called arousing the thought of enlightenment, because name and gain are a proxy for certainty. They're a grabbing, they're a knowing, they're a limiting. Throw them away and somehow this all works out. And I'm going to skip. So that was at the top of this page, that line, throw away name and gain. And at the bottom, he gives the great instruction, which I love. Just forget yourself for now and practice inwardly. That's it. Kill the Buddha, kill Kirsten, kill the gain, kill the loss. Forget yourself. Forget your idea of yourself for now, just for this moment. And practice inwardly. Get quiet, get still, slow down, relax. Go into the uncertainty, go into not knowing, and just breathe there. And that's everything. I hope that this was in some way useful or helpful. I am way over time. I do have to go, so I can't take any questions today, but put them in the comments. This is such a small channel right now, so if you comment, one, I'll be so super grateful. And if you have a question or anything, I will try my best to answer it. I will answer it. I will try my best to answer it, but ultimately you must find out for yourself. Don't believe me. Don't believe these guys. Don't believe any of it. Don't believe these guys either. Look into yourself. Get quiet. Get still. Tell yourself to not think for just now, just for a few moments. Breathe. And see what arises. And I hope you live your life awake, aware, present. Especially right now, if you're in the northern hemisphere, it's springtime and the flowers are just everywhere and beautiful and the birds are singing and there's sunlight, it's getting warmer. If you're in the southern hemisphere, fall is starting. It's a beautiful time of year. Oh, thank you guys. Oh, that's so, thank you. I'm really grateful for you being here and for your comments. Thank you. Do live your life. Come, if you don't already have a strong practice, if you have a practice, you got it. But if you don't already have a practice, join me on Thursday, 11:40 to 12. I'll walk us into getting anchored in your breath, still, slow, relaxed, not knowing. And then for 5 to 10 minutes, we'll just sit and breathe. And we'll practice being awake to this moment. Until then, I hope you all live your life awake and alive. Big love. Thank you. Bye. Say bye, kitten.